That second version was the jazz sound I was trying to get. It's not a totally different progression, it's still just a 2-5-1, but the chords seem to have a little bit more colour. And this was the next thing I started to learn after learning shell chords. Chord extensions, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths. So in the last episode, I talked about shell chords and guide tones. And that was all about stripping chords back down to their, what really matters. That's usually the root, the third, and the 7th. And that gives you the skeleton of the chord, right? But then I was looking at jazz standards and other pieces of music. I started seeing things like C major 9, D minor 9, G13, D minor 11, E7 sharp 9. And I was thinking, oh great, here's a bunch more of shapes that I need to memorize and chords that I need to understand. But eventually I started actually understanding these aren't new chords. A lot of the time they're just an extension on the normal 7th chords that we know, and those extensions seem to add that little bit more color. And the simple thing that helped me with this is the 9th, well, that's just adding a 2nd. The 11th, that's basically just adding a 4th. The 13th, that's just adding a 6th. So instead of trying to think, well, how am I going to add 9 to this or 13 to that? It's not, it's not a full theory of a whole extension, but it's just all about really adding those little bits and pieces that can give those chords those beautiful sounds. So instead of seeing numbers as, scary chord symbols, you start seeing and understanding them, how they can start coloring and changing those chords. C major 7, now that already had a beautiful major 7 sound. But when you add the 9th and change it around a bit, it feels a little bit more open, a little softer, a little wider, but it's still home. Just it has a slightly more color to it. And the same thing happens with minor chords. This sound was definitely one of my favorites early on. The D minor 7, don't get me wrong, sounds really nice, but just a D minor 7 sounds smoother, has a little bit more of a funkier sound, definitely a lot more color in it, and it just adds some extra flavor to it. So it's not about, trying to think of a brand new chord. It's still a D minor, just instead of just being a 7th, it's just with that little bit of added flavor. Let's listen to that again. This is a D minor 7. And the D minor 9. The 11ths, they're a little bit more trickier, so I'm not going to dive too deep into them, but really on minor chords, they do sound quite open and still quite beautiful. So here's a D minor 9, and here's with the 11th. Here's a minor 7, and the 11th. So to my ears, those 11ths, they just sound a little bit wider, a little bit more spacious. Once again, I think they fit funk really well. But at this stage, it's not about trying to learn every different shape and where all the 11ths are. It's just truly, really trying to understand that there's more ways of adding a little bit more color and a little bit more nuances to these chords. And it just sounds a little bit different to the ears and can be a little bit nicer and less stale. 13ths. Now these ones really help me understand the sound and the feel of dominant chords. So if I play like a G7 or a 13th. And that gives you that tension, and you really want to resolve from the dominant, so from the 5th to the root. So that G13, it just is really quite warm. Once again, just beautiful with its color and adds a whole bunch of tension. So it does the same job as a normal dominant chord. Like I said, you still want to go home with it, but just something about it sounds super jazzy. Also, I guess 13th, and specifically the G13, is the first chord on a sunny side of the street. And for me, it just brings back memories of some beautiful jazz. So I've been showing off a lot with, 2-5-1s, But using these extensions can be used, in any of those kind of chord progressions. One of my favorites is probably a 1, 5, 4 into a minor 4. So I'll play that for you now. If you played that with just the normal sevenths, I think it just doesn't sound anywhere near as interesting. And there is really a world of extensions out there. An example is, the Hendrix chord. That's a really cool E7 sharp 9. And these kind of other extensions will just add some tension, add some grittiness, depending on where they're played and how they played. They can add that bluesiness as well. So I started, really digging and looking into what other extensions are out there and try to get an understanding of how they fit within the chord and how they're fitting within the progression. So if I go back and play just a nice G13, which is a beautiful open chord. But if we play that Hendrix chord, which is a G7 sharp 9, it's going to sound a little bit more tense. Or, something like a G7 flat 9. So there's all these altered shapes and different tensions you can play, and, you can definitely start diving down a rabbit hole. But that's not what this episode's about. It's just about trying to show off that there's more to jazz than just playing the standard shapes that we see. And there's really more to just understanding that extensions just aren't numbers, but there's different sounds and different feels you can get from them. Some are super smooth, some are more tense, some are colourful, some are spicy. So as I mentioned, started off with the shell chords first, stripping it all the way back to get to that skeleton and get an understanding really what are those key tones. And then on top of that, well, how can we add some more tension or make it smoother or make it sound a little bit more funkier or wider? And that's where those extensions really came into play. So hopefully this episode helped you understand where 9ths, 11ths and 13ths fit in and how they matter. And not to think of them as complicated chord shapes. I needed to change my grips and play some crazy flat 7, sharp 9 type of thing. And it's not about memorizing these certain shapes, but really understanding the sound and the relationship between those extensions and the chord and where that chord fits within the progression. Thank you for checking out this episode. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. And I'd love to hear in your comments below what you thought of it. And if you have favorite extensions, like I said, that G13 from Sunny Side of the Street. It's definitely one of my favorite chords. And I just love dominant 9ths as well. Thanks all.